I've decided to introduce Ms. Darwish by first describing two of what I might call her fellow travelers. I don't know if she knows these two people. I don't know if these three people in total, two plus her, have ever met. But they have much in common. They have courage. They have the willingness to speak, even when they know that what they speak is going to be unpopular to many. And they have the stamina to confront those forces, including sometimes forces of political correctness. Support for the willingness to speak truth to power, and support for the desire to allow critical voices to be heard and then to be addressed critically is what prompted the creation of the Federalist Society a long time ago, back when I was a young law student. I've been a FedSoc member for 34 years, and Miss Ashley Finnegan, where are you, Miss Finnegan? She's outside. Miss Ashley Finnegan, who's president of the George Mason chapter of the Federalist Society, has done this society proud today. Anatoly Sharansky was born in the Ukraine and graduated with a degree in math from the Physical Technical Institute in Moscow. His early association with the human rights movement was as an English interpreter for Andrei Sakharov, and then some self-searching led him to emerge in his own right as a dissident. In 1973, Sharansky applied for an exit visa to Israel, but was refused on quote-unquote security grounds. He remained prominently involved in dissent until his arrest in 1977. He was convicted in 1978 of the usual charges of treason and spying on behalf of the United States, and sentenced to 13 years imprisonment. He spent the first 16 months in Moscow's infamous Lefortovo prison in solitary confinement and in a special torture cell, before being transferred to a Siberian gulag. Years later, following his release, Sharansky stressed his need throughout his imprisonment to remain emotionally independent. He attributed his survival, physical and spiritual, during this lengthy incarceration and during the unspeakable torture that he suffered, to his resistance to any sort of emotional surrender. Sharansky expressed the paradox that while he was an ordinary submissive Russian, he was in fact a slave, but that once he discovered his humanity and was punished for his allegiance to that humanity, he became a free man. His memoirs of his years as a prisoner are described in his book, Fear No Evil. I very strongly recommend that book to you all, and I can tell you that it has greatly influenced my life. Sharansky was released in 1986 and expelled from the USSR as part of an East-West prisoner exchange. He was released at the Iron Curtain in a still divided Germany. He was met by the Israeli ambassador to West Germany, who presented him immediately with a new Israeli passport under the Hebraicized name of Natan Sharansky. He and his wife are alive and well today, and he has been a cabinet minister in Israel's government. That's fellow traveler number one. Fellow traveler number two. Cuba's population in 1960 was 6 million. About 3.5 million of them were adults. According to the human rights group Freedom House, 500,000 of those adults have passed through Castro's political prison camps. At one time, during 1961, there were 300,000 in jail at that one time for political offenses nationwide. This makes Castro's political incarceration rate, although of course not his murder rate, but his political incarceration rate, higher than Stalin's or Hitler's. Credit for finally exposing the horrors of Castro's gulag goes to former political prisoner Armando Valladares, whose 1984 memoirs, entitled Against All Hope, I also strongly recommend to you. In 1960, Valladares was arrested in his office for the crime of refusing to display a pro-Castro sign on his desk. He was summarily sentenced to 30 years in prison for the offense. Of course, Valladares was condemned as a hater, as a stooge of the right, as a hater of the Cuban people, by many people. In prison, Valladares refused to, in his words, commit spiritual suicide, which is to say, he rejected any, quote, rehabilitation, re-education by his jailers. He balked at any confession of his alleged sins. For this, Armando Valladares paid dearly. To this day, he remains crippled from the beatings he endured in prison. He managed to get his writings smuggled into Europe, and in December 1977, 47 United States senators signed an appeal for his release, and Amnesty International took up his cause. He was released to the United States in 1982. In 1986, 4 years later, President Ronald Reagan read his book, Against All Hope, which I just mentioned. Immediately, the day after completing the book, he named Valladares U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Human Rights Commission. I met Mr. Valladares in 1987, and I met Mr. Sharansky in 2005. And as I just said, last year at Princeton University, I met Ms. Darwish. Ms. Darwish is extremely active, and among many things that she does is to write a blog. Before I give you her bio and pass the podium to her, let me cite from her most recent blog entry. Quote, about a year ago, this is Ms. Darwish writing, about a year ago, I posted an Arabic language poem entitled Tears at the Heart of the Holocaust on my website. The poem expressed its Arab author's love for the Jewish people and his mourning over what happened to them in the Holocaust. The brave poet, Mr. Ala al-Saeg, is an immigrant to the United States from Iraq who now lives in Missouri. Such poems did not sit well with the Muslim community. He received threats because of his support. He was called an infidel and a traitor to Islam, but he continued with his writing of poems, and he did not take the threats too seriously. Mr. al-Saeg, as well as Muslim critics and former Muslims who are accused of apostasy, are living under threats, but lo and behold, if we dare to speak about such fears, we are immediately silenced and accused of being Islamophobic. The mainstream media insists that there is no need to fear Sharia or its enforcers in America, and that we are exaggerating our plight from Islam. We are told that what happens in the Arab street could never happen in the streets of America. Tell that to Mr. al-Saeg after the unthinkable happened to him on August 14, 2011, in broad daylight and heavy traffic when he was viciously attacked on the streets of St. Louis. As he was driving at 10:30 in the morning on Compton Street near Park Avenue, a white car cut him off and hit his car while another car stopped behind him. The occupants of the cars entered al-Saeg's car, pointing a gun at him. They pushed his upper body down against the steering wheel, stabbed him, and pulled off his shirt to expose his back. Then with a knife, they carved a Star of David on his back while laughing at him as they recited his pro-Jewish poem. And if you go to Ms. Darwish's blog, you will see a photo of Mr. al-Saeg's back. Nonie Darwish was born in 1948 in Cairo, Egypt. She moved to then Egyptian-ruled Gaza as a young child when her father, a lieutenant general in the Egyptian army, was sent there by Egyptian dictator Gamal Abdel Nasser to serve as the commander of Egyptian army intelligence. Her father founded the Gaza fedayeen, who launched raids across Israel's southern border that between 1951 and 1956 killed approximately 400 Israeli civilians. In July 1956, Ms. Darwish's father became the very first targeted execution ever carried out by a team of the Israeli Defense Forces in response to the fedayeen's attacks, making her father a shaheed or martyr according to Islamist teachings. Nonie Darwish has written the following: I always blamed Israel for my father's death because that's what I was taught. I never looked at why Israel killed my father. They killed my father because his fedayeen were killing Israelis. They killed my father because when I was growing up, we had to recite poetry pledging jihad against Israel. We would have tears in our eyes pledging that we wanted to die. I speak to people who think there was no terrorism against Israel before the 1967 war. How can they deny this? My father died because of it. After her father's death, the Darwish family moved back to Cairo, Egypt, where she attended Catholic high school and then the American University in Cairo, earning a BA in sociology and anthropology. She then worked as an editor and translator for the Middle East news agency until she emigrated to the United States in 1978 with her husband. After arriving in the United States, she became a Christian and began attending a non-denominational evangelical church. She is now a fellow citizen of ours of the United States. About 1 year after the September 11, 2001 attacks, Ms. Darwish began writing columns critical of Islamic extremism and the silence of coward moderate Muslims. Quote, after 9/11, very few Americans of Arab and Muslim origin spoke out, and from my experience, it took us a long time to get noticed by Western media. Western media still regards Muslim organizations such as CARE, this is her writing, I'm quoting, Western media still regards Muslim organizations such as CARE as representative of moderate Muslims in America. This is not the case. Muslim groups in the U.S. try to silence us and to intimidate American campuses who invite us to speak. I often tell Muslim students that Arab Americans who are speaking out against terrorism are not the problem. It is the terrorists who are giving Islam a bad name. And what the West must do is to ask the politically incorrect questions, and what we Americans of Arab and Muslim descent owe them is honest answers. End quote. Nonie Darwish has spoken on numerous college campuses, including Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Princeton, as you know, Brown, Cornell, UCLA, NYU, Virginia Tech, UC Berkeley, and others. She has also spoken on Capitol Hill, she has spoken to Britain's House of Lords, and she has spoken at the European Parliament. She has been vilified. She has received many death threats. Indeed, she has committed a capital offense in many Islamic nations because she has chosen another religion. She'll be speaking for 45 minutes, and there will be plenty of time for lots of questions afterwards, questions which will be moderated by Dean Kelsey. Ladies and gentlemen, it's with great pleasure that I ask you to warmly welcome Ms. Nonie Darwish.
Inviting me to this distinguished law school, George Mason University. What an honor it is to be here. As a new immigrant in the United States, when I came here in 1979, I was walking through the halls of my new job, my first job in America. And I saw a sign that said, "This organization does not discriminate on the basis of gender, religion, national origin, or race." I was in awe of a sign that few Americans ever noticed, and they just took it for granted. I marveled at this statement, which was nothing short of a miracle in my life. Having come from living in the Middle East for 30 years under Sharia law, in oppressive dictatorships and police states. I remember reading this sign and rereading it. And it was just a relief. I finally, realized I'm in America. I'm free. I'm living under a totally different way of life, a totally different law. For the first time in my life, I felt equal to men, really equal, under the law. Laws in any country are the bottom line of your rights and your duties. And what's acceptable and what's not. It's the criteria of the values of society, its morality, its adherence to civil law, human rights. It's the law. It took me a while to adapt to my new country, to the new laws. My found freedom in America. It's not easy when you're told you're equal to men to really feel that you're equal to men. And it took me a long time to realize it and enjoy it. Before I continue, I just want to emphasize that I'm not here to talk about people. I'm not going to talk about people because people are different. Groups of people are different. Or I'm not here to offend the good and peace-loving Muslims. Of course not, because my whole family in Egypt, hundreds of people who are my immediate family in Egypt, are some of the most wonderful and peace-loving and sweet people you'll ever meet. So, just like everybody else, Muslims have the good and bad, like everybody else. I'm not talking about people. I'm here to speak about an ideology and a legal system that is the official law in over 54 Muslim countries. Of course, the adherence varies from one country to another. But since most of us here in America, we understand that there is no ideology or religion, secular or religious, that's beyond questioning. In America, this is America. We can criticize. As I was coming last night in the airplane here, one of the passengers coming in the airplane as I was sitting was wearing a T-shirt, and it had a cross, and around it was a circle and a slash, and it said bad religion. He's walking. That's his opinion. God bless America. I disagree with him, but it's his right. That's his right. This is our law. He has the right to do that. The day America shies from freedom of speech is the day freedom ends for everybody. Most people, including myself, don't want or care to criticize any religion, in the sense that a religion really is a personal relationship with God. But if religion expands itself so much beyond a personal relationship with God and becomes a one-party totalitarian system with a very elaborate legal system that can put you to death if you leave it, and if that religion has a military institution called Jihad, then it's no longer a private matter. That religion is no longer has the right to say, don't criticize me, because it's not immune to criticism anymore. By assuming the role of government, that a religion has opened itself to criticism. It has by nature opened itself to criticism. When an ideology becomes the government, then you better believe it, we are going to criticize it. If you believe that all political ideologies, all religions, all cultures are equal in its adherence to human rights, in its democratic values, if you believe that all cultures, all religions respect civil liberties the same way, and thus they are all beyond criticism, then you probably will not need education anymore. Why do we get an education if everything is equal, everything is the same? It is. If that is true, then of course no need to criticism. Just a quick introduction of my background. I was born and raised as a Muslim in Cairo, Egypt, and in the Gaza Strip as a child in the 50s. I was really living in the heart of the Arab-Israeli conflict. My father was the head of the Egyptian military intelligence in Gaza. At that time, Egypt ruled Gaza. And the mission of my father with Gamal Abdel Nasser, telling him his mission was to destroy Israel. I lived through the 56. I hope you'll put up with me because I have a little cold. I lived through the 56, 67, and the 73 wars. I witnessed oppression of women, oppression of Christians in Egypt. It's happening today, who are treated like second-class citizens. I witnessed female genital mutilation. My mother's generation in Egypt, 97% of women suffered from that operation. And I witnessed the humiliation and mistreatment of lower classes in Egypt, unfortunately. Thank you. I do have some water here. Thank you so much. Classism that exists in all of the Middle East. Polygamy and its devastating effects on family dynamics, husband-wife relationships, children to their father's relationship, when children see their father coming to this house for a while and then going to another house to another set of children. This all changes the family dynamics completely. I experienced first class the horror of honor killings. I knew somebody who was killed because she was raped. To those who claim that all of this has nothing to do with Islam or Sharia, I want to tell them, let's examine it and see if there's any connection. The recent Middle East revolutions, and we all saw the revolutions happening in Egypt, and I really felt so much compassion and so much fear for my people in Egypt when I saw the revolution, and I wished them all the best. I really wanted them to have this freedom they are yearning for. Those young men are really putting their lives on the line on the streets of Cairo just to have freedom and democracy. And unfortunately, freedom and democracy are, Sharia law has a role to play against the accomplishment of freedom and democracy. We are seeing right before our very eyes today how Sharia can manipulate the situation after a revolution and stop the development of the country from tyranny to freedom. And it's all because of Sharia. It stands in the way of freedom and basic human and civil rights. Let's start with one concept in Sharia. And this is in Sharia. Jihad is not just in the Quran and the Hadith and the Seerah. It's in Sharia books. Some Muslim apologists in America after 9/11 said that jihad is misunderstood, the Quran is misinterpreted, and that jihad only means it's an inner struggle and self-analysis. I like that meaning, but I've never heard it in the Middle East when I was growing up. That is not mentioned. It's not mentioned. The people who say that the meaning of Sharia is an inner struggle, they are not telling you that it's totally, it's 97% when the word Sharia is mentioned in the Quran, it refers to war, violence, and actual killing. The word killing is in there, or violence. The 7 great imams, there are 7 great imams in the 7th and 8th century who wrote Sharia. And when they wrote the Sharia, which is the laws are clear. They are not, prone to interpretation. That's why they're called law. Law is law. Is if you do this, this is the consequence. This is legal, this is illegal. Law is very clear. And Sharia is very clear. And when these imams wrote the Sharia, they wrote it on the basis of actually interpreting the Quran, the Hadith, and the Sunnah. They didn't write it without interpretation. So the interpretation of Islam has already happened. The interpretation and information about Islam has already existed in the 7th century, right after Muhammad died, and that's how the Sharia was written. So the Sharia is actually the interpretation of the Quran. This is the definition of jihad in the Sharia book, and I'm using in this discussion a mainstream Sharia book. It's called Renounced of the Traveler, and that Sharia book is, you can buy it on Amazon. It's stamped as correct interpretation in English by Al-Azhar University, by high legal of Islamic authorities in Jordan, in Syria, in Saudi Arabia, and in Egypt. So we cannot say that what is said in this book is my opinion. It's not my opinion. This is the definition of jihad in Reliance of the Traveler. To war against non-Muslims derived from the word mujahada, signifying warfare to establish the religion. I have all the references and the page numbers. In Al-Azhar Islamic University, which is in Cairo, it's over a 1,000-year-old university. This is the definition of Sharia. A permanent war institution against Jews, Christians, and pagans. Sharia states, this is a law, by the way, jihad is the main duty of every Muslim. Not performing jihad or fleeing from combat with unbelievers is considered an enormity crime. So, not doing jihad as a Muslim is a crime, and if you flee from it, it is a high crime. And they've already defined it as escaping from combat. So it's combat. That's what jihad is. When the word jihad, so it is 97% of the time it means war in the Quran. This gets complicated, really. The concept of jihad gets complicated when jihad is considered the main duty of every Muslim head of state. They call the Muslim head of state the Khalifa. In the Sharia book, it says, the Khalifa fights all other people until they become Muslim. It is a commandment. In the Sharia book, the job of the Khalifa, the job of a Muslim head of state is defined. And number 1 or 2 in his job requirements is to do jihad against non-Muslims. And this is a continuation of the law. When non-Muslims are in their own country, in which case jihad is a communal obligation upon Muslims each year. He who provides the equipment for soldiers in jihad has himself performed jihad. So a person who's incapable of fighting must help the jihad by providing anything to the soldiers of jihad. What the West needs to understand is that the jihad doctrine challenges the sovereignty of every non-Muslim country. I'm going to repeat that. The jihad concept challenges the sovereignty of non-Muslim country. This is very important. Because non-Muslim countries, their rights to preserve their country, let's say as a Judeo-Christian country or, communist, whatever, socialist, their right to preserve their country's values is not respected by the jihadists. It's not respected by the Sharia. This is not just one law. These commandments of doing jihad, whether it's through the leader or through the ordinary citizen, is not just one law or 2 laws. This is constant in the Sharia book. For example, the Khalifa, there's another law, the Khalifa, which is the Muslim head of state. He makes war upon Jews, Christians, and Zoroastrians until they become Muslim, or else those non-Muslims must pay a poll tax, a special tax, while being belittled. So non-Muslims have to be, who live in a Muslim state, have to pay a special tax called jizya. And it's a kind of like penalty for being a non-Muslim in a Muslim country. And they have to pay it while they're being belittled. They have to be reduced in status as a citizen. This is what it said. It's law number 09.8, page 602 of the Sharia book. Another law, it says, the Khalifa fights all other people. By other people, they mean non-Muslims, until they become Muslim. Law number 09.9, page 603. When the Khalifa appoints a ruler on a region, so even if there is a subdivision of an area where the Khalifa oversees, and there is another ruler adjacent to enemy land, by enemy land they mean non-Muslim land, that ruler will undertake jihad against enemies, dividing the spoils of war, of battle, among combatants and deserving recipients. That was exactly Gamal Abdel Nasser telling my father in Gaza to attack enemy land, and his men will get the deserving spoils of war. That's exactly what happened. It's happening today. It's also jihad is the primary duty of the Muslim head of state, as I said. Is not only to do jihad, he has to do jihad and also preserve Islam in its original form. He has to follow Sharia. He cannot change the law. He cannot make it like, okay, let's reform Islam here, or let's stop attacking our neighbors who are not Muslim. He cannot do that. Leaders who do not wish to do jihad against non-Muslim countries, like, for example, Israel or any non-Muslim country that suffers from jihad. Such leaders who refuse to do that, and that's violation of their job as a Muslim head of state. If you do not want to do jihad, you as a Muslim leader has been discredited. You have violated your job as a Muslim head of state. And you are now considered an apostate. Muslims, in that case, the citizens, are obliged to rise up and remove that leader if he is no longer a Muslim. By being no longer a Muslim, it doesn't mean he came and announced, I'm no longer a Muslim. That leader can just go and sign a peace treaty with Israel and take it seriously and respect that peace treaty. So people will consider him no longer a Muslim, that because he altered the sacred law or makes reprehensible innovations called bid'ah in Arabic law, and this is law number 025.3, page 640. So a Muslim head of state is not free to rule outside of Sharia. That means that a Muslim head of state cannot reject or change Sharia law. Do you remember any leaders who had done that? When President Anwar Sadat signed a peace treaty with Israel and took that peace treaty seriously and actually wanted to work for peace with Israel, at least no military problems anymore with Israel, he was immediately called an apostate. The whole Arab world erupted in fatwas, constant fatwas. I mean, all mosques, thousands of mosques around the Middle East declared Anwar Sadat as an infidel and an apostate of Islam, and that he must be killed. Nobody knows that. A lot of people think he was just killed by some crazy guy. No. The whole Arab world wanted to kill him. They removed the Arab League from Cairo because he's an infidel leader. He violated his jihad duty as a Muslim head of state. Most of the assassinations of Muslim leaders are not because they're tyrants. You think most Muslim leaders are killed because they're tyrants? Actually, the ones who get killed are the ones who are the least tyrants. Because the real tyrants, you cannot reach them. Saddam Hussein, you could not reach to kill him. Gaddafi, you could not reach to kill him. But the easy ones are the ones who are more moderate, the ones who want to have peace with Israel, and those are the leaders who get killed in the Muslim world. Easier to kill them. And is it any wonder that the Pakistani leaders were taking billions of dollars from America to hand them Bin Laden? And what did they do with the billions of dollars? While at the same time telling America, oh, we're looking for him, we're going to give him to you. He's living in the capital, and right there near the military institution, military places, in a big, compared to the regular human being, in a big mansion. He's being taken care of, and the military knew he was there. And why is that? Why are Muslim leaders doing this game between America and their people? Because they have to play this game. If they refuse to help the West, they're violating international law, which is to harbor terrorists. I don't want to be an Arab leader because I have to have double face. You come to the West, okay, we're going to, catch all those bad, terrorists. We're going to do this. We're going to put them in jail. Okay, they say, peace, peace, peace to the West. They turn around and they go to their people and say, jihad, jihad, jihad. Why are they doing this? They're not crazy. They're doing this because they have no choice. This is the sad part of being an Arab or Muslim leader. Because you have to conform to Sharia law, which Sharia law, you have an obligation in the Sharia law. Under international law, suddenly they are part helping terrorism. So Muslim heads of states, all of them has to cover up. They have to cover up. Either work under the table with the terrorist group so they can survive, or put them in jail and they get killed. It's an impossible situation, and the problem is because of Sharia. And nobody knows that. Nobody talks about that. So in that kind of dynamics, only tyrannical governments can survive in the Middle East. Only the governments that follow the Sharia 100% make their duty to be an enemy of the West and Israel for the rest of their lives, and stand up to Western interests in the Middle East. Lo and behold, that's Ahmadinejad. Ahmadinejad is following the Sharia 100%. And all the rest are playing games. And that's why he's the most popular in Egypt. If you ask them who's the most popular leader in the whole Middle East, they'll tell you Ahmadinejad. Because he's not a hypocrite. He's following Sharia the way it's supposed to be. So this is the problem. The problem is Sharia. And by the way, the number one victims of Sharia are the Muslim people themselves. The Muslim people themselves. And you'll know why right now. Now we see how it's very difficult to be a Muslim head of state with all these conflicting laws international against Sharia, local. It's a mess, and you have to hold the stick from the middle and play games. That's the role of the Muslim head of state. If the Muslim head of state follows Sharia 100%, like Ahmadinejad, then there is a law to protect him. It says, it is obligatory to obey the commands and the interdictions of the Khalifa, even if he's unjust. Can you believe that? If the Muslim head of state is a good Muslim following Sharia 100%, then he can do whatever he wants. And you wonder why there's an Ahmadinejad in the world, and there's Arafat and Saddam Hussein's of the world. All of these radical Muslim leaders who are oppressing their people, because he's got to be respected even if he's unjust. Another law. Rebellions against the Khalifa, even if it's unjust, is considered an enormous crime. You have to bow to Ahmadinejad according to the law. Perhaps this law, there is another law that I believe is the number one law that's most devastating to the creation of democracy and freedom in the Muslim world. This is, I'm going to read it to you in a minute. This law is the reason why we will never have freedom and democracy in the Middle East unless Sharia is put outside of the realm of government. Here is the law. A Khalifa, a Muslim head of state, is allowed to hold office through seizure of power, meaning through force. Can you believe it? That's law number 025.4, page 644. I believe this law, if you really understand it, you will understand why you will never have democracy. What that law means is how can any elected leader through a democratic process, through elections, feel safe in his office, feel safe to rule when there is a law that legally gives permission for someone else to for whatever reason, he could claim that he's an infidel and give him the authority to remove him from office and become legitimate. Become, after he removes him from office, whether it's through a coup d'etat, assassination, whatever he does, and be legally legitimate. This can never produce democracy. Unfortunately, because of that law, a large number of Muslim leaders are in office after a coup d'etat or assassination. Check all the history of every Muslim country. You will see that. Pakistani leaders, from one coup d'etat to another. The Gamal Abdel Nasser in Egypt came after the 52 revolution when he said freedom, democracy. He even went to Tahrir Square, which was called Ismailia Square at that time, and changed the name and made it Tahrir Square, meaning Freedom Square. He wanted to change the country and give democracy and freedom. And what happened? He was himself originally a Muslim Brotherhood. When he came to office and actually started ruling, he could not abide by Sharia law, of course. So the Muslim Brotherhood in 1955, like a year after he took office or two, they attempted an assassination of him. Why? Because he didn't rule according to Sharia. This is the Muslim Brotherhood. It legally gives them permission to assassinate the president and remove him from office. And that is what's happening. Every Muslim country, Saddam Hussein came after a coup d'etat and assassination. Gaddafi came after a coup d'etat and assassination. Hafez al-Assad came after a coup d'etat. I mean, they all like that. Even the Saudi kingdom, they are scared from Al-Qaeda of the Arabian Peninsula. They want to remove them from office. It's all because they are not Muslim enough for them. That's how they feel. They are just not Muslim enough. They are conspiring with the West. Any Muslim leader who just wants to treat the West equally, on an equal basis, as with respect and with according to international law, he's called a puppet. A puppet of the West. You get a Muslim leader who wants to build a new relationship with the West. Can he dare do that? No. All these underground Islamist organizations will rise and call him a puppet, a traitor of Islam. He must be removed, and that's what happens. And these leaders have to put an army around them on a permanent basis to survive. And they have to put in jail all of these, underground Islamist groups in jail. And that's what Mubarak did. He wanted to have a good relation with America. He didn't want to attack Israel because there is a peace treaty with Israel. He wanted to be fair. And that's why he was taken out like that. Because they called him puppet of the U.S. And if you notice, because I read Arabic, so I was looking at all these, the revolution. I was looking at the signs because I wanted to read these signs because these signs reflect the mind of the people, what they really want. All of it was about removing the dictator. There was no sign that said, we want to remove Sharia law from being the law of the government of Egypt. Not one law. Or I never saw a law that says equal rights for all Jews, Christians, women. No, I didn't see any of that. Everything was about this puppet of the Israelis. And they have a Star of David on his forehead. That's why we want to remove him. Because he's not Muslim enough. And that is the challenge. And we must understand that game, and we must speak about it openly. In our media, we must speak about it openly. All these leaders are either coming from a coup d'etat or they have caused a coup d'etat. But more important, almost all Muslim countries have signed a declaration that says that Sharia law supersedes any other law. That is another problem. Mubarak, while he wants to treat the West fairly and treat Israel fairly, in 1991, to make the Islamists leave him alone, he made Sharia the law of the land. So he held a conference in Cairo. It's called the Cairo Declaration, where I think 45 Muslim countries attended. And in it, all these Muslim countries signed that declaration that stated that Sharia law supersedes any other international or local law if it's in conflict with them. So here we are, Cairo today, Egypt today has Sharia even after the revolution. Number 2. Article number 2 of the Egyptian constitution states that Sharia is the law of the land. And just to show you that after the revolution there is no hope, there was a big demonstration by the Islamists who said that if anybody touches that article number 2, which makes Sharia the law of the land, there will be bloodshed on the streets. You better not touch it. And it's there. Nobody can touch it. Oh, goodbye, freedom, democracy in Cairo, in Egypt. Another law in Sharia that is really, in my opinion, also very, very, nobody knows about it, but Islam, slavery, was never abolished by Islam. A lot of people don't know that. Slavery was practiced in Saudi Arabia officially until 1962, when officially, again, Saudi Arabia was embarrassed and took it out of its laws. In 1962, as recent as 1962, after it was embarrassed from the West. And it was highly regulated. There were slave markets in Cairo until just early 20th century. There were slave markets in Saudi Arabia. Just very recently. And you can go on the internet if you think it's so unbelievable. Go on the internet. There is a sheikh, two people on Egyptian TV and Kuwaiti TV. On Egyptian TV, there is a very well-known and respected Muslim leader who said that jihad, because we are not good enough to make jihad on a regular basis, people in Egypt, we are becoming poor. He attributed the poverty of the Muslim world to the lack of doing jihad. And I'm quoting him. And he said, because you neglected jihad, you have become poor, and you can go back and become rich by going back to jihad and acquiring slaves, making the countries that you go into jihad with acquire slaves, women slaves, sexual slaves. And at the same time, in Kuwaiti TV, another very prominent woman who was running for political office in Kuwait, she said that we must reinstate openly the institution of sexual slavery of non-Muslim women that she believes can be captured in the jihadi wars. And she wants them to be sold in markets with actual tagged prices. And she said this is the law of Sharia. She was serious. It wasn't a joke. And you can see it on YouTube. If you put sexual slavery, Kuwaiti, you'll find it. And I'm not saying that. She said this is real Sharia. And I think she's right. Legally, she's right. Because under Sharia, until today, slavery and sexual slavery of women was never abolished. And nobody can dare to abolish it. Because in the Quran it says men can have up to 4 wives, and ma malakat aymanakum in Arabic. Ma malakat aymanakum means, and the slaves you own. Any number. It's still the law. Law means something. You cannot say Allah is sitting on the, nobody practices it. It influences society. It influences the look of women. It affects how women behave. It affects how non-Muslims walking in the streets of a Muslim country. A non-Muslim woman walking in the streets of a non-Muslim country uncovered, how she can feel. Those Coptic Christian girls who are being kidnapped, I can tell how they feel when there is a law or not in their favor. Sharia is a very dictator-friendly law, and it gives Muslim leaders the tools for despotic one-party rule. But amazingly, many Arabs blame the existence of their dictatorships on American foreign policy. I have a dictator because America wants it. They want all these dictators to rule us, and it's America's fault. Imperialism, past injustices, it's all their fault. It's never Sharia's fault. It's never my fault. It's never I allowed this to happen in my country. It's never the Islamist group's fault. It's always someone else outside the world. And there are many in the West who bought this claim, since they cannot imagine that Muslim anger is actually self-inflicted by Sharia. Muslims must justify jihad. When you are in office and you're obliged to do jihad against a non-Muslim country adjacent to your land, are you going to say in the international community, I have a duty to kill them? No, you can't. You have to find a good reason. They are Satan. They are bad. They hate us. We are just protecting ourselves. They are demons. The best excuse to justify violence is to constantly claim victimhood and dehumanize and blame others who are the targets of your jihad. This explains why Muslim educational system is extremely hard to reform. They promise reform, have never abandoned the hate education. They say, we're going to stop putting all of this in the, It's unbelievable. You go look what they are being educated. The children, those poor Arab little children. What they are told day in and day out. And you are going to see, and maybe I should show you now, a few examples of what they are saying. Not when I was a kid, put that aside. What they are educating their children today in the Muslim world.
اللهم دمر اليهود تدميرا وحطمهم تحطيما. اللهم ابتليهم بمرض ليس منه شفاء وداء ليس له دواء وانزل عليهم صاعقة من السماء. اللهم ابتليهم بكل بلاء. اللهم ارسل عليهم طير أبابيل ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل فتجعلهم كعصف مأكول. اللهم رم نساءهم كما رموا نساء المسلمين. اللهم يتم أطفالهم كما يتم أطفال المسلمين. اللهم بارك جهود المجاهدين. اللهم بارك جهود المجاهدين. اللهم اجعل مصر قريب. اللهم اجعل مصر قريب. اللهم اجعل مصر قريب. آمين آمين. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
ما شاء الله ما شاء الله ما شاء الله. بسم الله ما شاء الله. بسم الله ما شاء الله. عن قصد وعن عمد يعني تعمدت أن يختم اللقاء بدعوتين طيبين وزي ما انتم شايفين. طبعا ولاد حافظ مسألة الفهم ستأتي إن شاء الله، ستأتي إن شاء الله إن شاء الله، بس هي دي المرحلة وده أصغر نموذج من خطوات المستقبل معانا.
اليهود سيكولوجيتهم الإرهابية هي أساسا سيكولوجية تنبع أساسا من حبهم للملفحة، يعني الإله الوحيد أو الدين الوحيد اليهودي هو المال، ليست الديانة اليهودية ولا الحلم الأكبر كما يقول إسرائيل الكبرى. هذه كذبة هم يخدعون نفسهم بها. أنا دائما أتساءل لماذا هتلر أبعد الصهاينة أو بالتأكيد هم شخصيتهم تستحق هذا الأمر، لذلك هم عانوا في هذه المذبحة أو في هذه الإبادة، لذلك هم يتقمصون نفس الشخصية ليعكسوها على الشعب الفلسطيني.
الليلة مع درس من أخطر بتاعت سلسلة السيرة كلها. معنى اليهود يا رسول الله؟ مش معنى اليهود. اليهود ثبت من السنين اللي فاتت انهم زي السرطان، لو ما اتشالوش من جسد الأمة هيموتوا الأمة كلها. اليهود ثبت ان هم لو كانوا اتسابوا كانوا دخلوا الفرس والروم في جزيرة العرب. اليهود خطر على العالم كله. اليهود كانوا خطر على استقرار الجزيرة العربية كلها. اليهود هم اليهود. لغاية دلوقتي لسه قلوبنا مولعة بالمناظر المذابح اللي عملوها في المسلمين لما دخلوا صبرا وشتيلة. دخلوا صبرا وشتيلة شارون قطع الأعضاء بتاعت الأطفال وعملها عقد عشان يتباهى بيه وقطع أجساد الأطفال بتوع المسلمين. لما اليهود في العصر الحديث دخلوا صبرا وشتيلة وجاب واحد كل من اليهود امرأة حامل وفرغ في رقبتها الرشاش، لما ماتت فتح بطنها وطلع الجنين، كانت في الشهر التاسع، ذبحوا قدام المواطنين المسلمين. رسالة لك يا كل يهودي في الأرض، كانش محمد سوف يعود. يا احفاد القردة والخنازير يوم الانتقام جاي، يا ألعن خلق الله اللي هيبايعوا رسول الله على الموت مرة تانية جايين. استنونا وهتشوفوا يا ألعن خلق الله. اوعى يا أمة محمد تخافوا من حرب اليهود. لو ما حاربتوش عشان فلسطين ربنا هيحاربكم. اختاروا انتوا خايفين من مين أكتر، يا حرب مع اليهود يا حرب مع الله.
هؤلاء الملاعين الذين غضب الله عليهم أولاد الحيات والأفاعي قتل رسولنا صلى الله عليه وسلم، وأنه مات من أثر سم اليهودية. فإذا علمنا أن اليهود هم قتلت الأنبياء، قتلت يحيى وقتلت زكريا، ذبحوا يحيى النبي الصالح، ذبحوه وقدموا رأسه هدية إلى مومس منه وساته إلى عاهرة من عاهرات بني إسرائيل. أن نعاديهم عداوة دينية بحتة، ليست من أجل الأرض المقدسة المباركة المطهرة التي بارك الله فيها وحولها، ومن أجل غزة أو الأقصى أو كذا فحسب، وإنما نعاديهم بداية لعداوتهم لله عز وجل ولقتلهم للنبيين.
إذا نود أن نبين أنه يجب علينا أن نعاديهم اعتقادا.
نعم.
لأن الحقيقة أن الأمر اختلط على الناس الآن. فالبعض يتصور أن المسألة قضية أرض أو قضية قومية أو قضية الأقصى المبارك. القضية أكبر من ذلك كما تفضلت فضيلتك، هي قضية اعتقادية، فيجب أن نعاديهم لأنهم أهل قتل وعداء للخير والدين.
There are many others clips like that, day in and day out. That's what Arab children watch. This is how I grew up, and nobody used to believe me, but thank God they're still doing it until today. Until today, they are still doing it in Arab TV, poisoning the minds of beautiful young Arab children. Why? And believe it or not, if you grow up with such propaganda day in and day out, it can feel and sound normal and holy and good. Because they're monsters, I must kill them. That's what you come out with. I am saving the world from evil people called Jews. And that's how we feel. And this is a challenge. Then when are they going to stop saying that? And you wonder why we have terrorists? There is an overwhelming number of Muslim men who want to give their life. They are letting them go. Want to give their life and do terror work. Do you think there's a shortage of young Muslim men who want to do terrorism? There is no shortage. There is other clips in which a very well-known sheikh, Al-Qaradawi, saying, if I ask for 100 jihadists, I get 2,000. If I ask for 5 jihadists, I get hundreds. There is no shortage. And why? It's not because they are evil or bad. If that's all what you see, you really believe it. And you want to go and do what they ask you to do. So this is at the national level, Sharia. This is what it causes. At the individual level, Sharia kills anybody who leaves Islam. There is a law that states if anybody leaves Islam, kill him. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. All the schools of Sharia agree on that. Not one school of Sharia forbids the killing of people who leave Islam. And a lot of people want to say, that's not true. That's not my opinion. Yeah, it's not your opinion as a Muslim. There's a lot of Muslims who are against this. But this is the law. In Egypt, there was a survey recently. 65% of Egyptians wants the Sharia to apply to anyone who leaves Islam, which means killing apostates. This is the public opinion of Egyptians. Of course, there's a lot of Muslims in America, after living here, they change and they say, no, we don't want to do that. But it's not the law of your religion. And it's not the public opinion of 1.2 billion Muslims living outside the United States. And this is where the problem is. Vigilante street justice is also allowed in Sharia. This is the problem of Sharia. Is, let's say you're living as a Muslim in a more lenient country, like let's say Turkey, and you want to become a Christian, let's say. You want to leave Islam, change your religion. It's internationally under the law of the world. You're allowed to do that, but even in Turkey, it's not allowed. This is where the catch is, the brilliance of Sharia. To force Muslims to apply the law, Sharia doesn't leave the application of law to the police and to the states. The brilliance of Sharia, there is a law that states that a Muslim is forgiven under the law if he kills an apostate. So if you're an apostate, if you leave Islam, you walk in the street, not afraid of the police, you're not afraid of the government to come and arrest you. You're afraid of any neighbor, a fellow citizen. You have to look over your shoulder because under Islamic law, a Muslim is forgiven. And I'll give you the law number. Law number 05.4, page 593 of mainstream Sharia books. There was an example in Egypt of a man who was killed. He didn't declare himself an apostate. He actually acted like he was not following Islam. He was a journalist, and he was condemned as an apostate against his will. His name is Farag Foda. In 1996, Farag Foda was gunned down in front of his house in Cairo. The man who killed him was taken to jail and he was put in trial. Guess who defended him in the trial in Cairo? The head of Al-Azhar University, the number one man in Islam in Egypt. He went to the court and said that this man who killed was right in killing him and he should not go to jail because he was executing his right under Sharia because the government of Egypt failed to kill the apostate. It's happening today, ladies and gentlemen. It's affecting people today. Not only that, vigilante street justice is also allowed under another law. This law, it says, the killer of an adulterer will not be punished. Law number 05.4, page 593. So, a lot of people say honor killing in the Muslim, in Islam has nothing to do with Islam. Honor killing has nothing to do with Islam. There's no law that said kill. Yes, there is a law that encourages honor killing in Sharia, and it says the killer of an adulterer, yes, they don't mention women, but it's always a woman who's killed for having sexual relations outside of marriage. Why is it always women? Because men have the right to have up to 4 wives. In Islam, there is a kind of marriage called pleasure marriage and temporary marriage of a man, where a man can verbally say, I marry you. For an hour, he can have a wife. And after they have pleasure with each other, then you are divorced, thank you, bye-bye. And he gives her a dowry. It's legal. It's a dowry of some money. And that's why a man in Islam can never be caught in adultery. It's always the woman. 75% of the women in the jails of Pakistan are there for sexual crimes. They have a boyfriend, whatever. So that is the problem. Honor killing, indirectly or directly, is supported by Sharia. There is another law that says, also in Sharia, it says parents and grandparents will not be prosecuted for killing their offspring. That's another law that, of course, I'm not saying Muslims kill their offspring. Please don't quote me this way. I am quoting a law in Sharia that sooner or later will make parents of girls who have boyfriends and kill because of an honor killing, they can get away with murder. And that's why in Jordan, they don't put them in jail. Why? Because Sharia supports them. That is the power of the fatwa, the death warrant. The West learned of the dreaded fatwa when one was issued against Salman Rushdie. Even the death penalty of apostates surpasses political lines, boundaries. Here, Ayatollah Khomeini issued on Iranian radio a fatwa of death against a British writer who's originally from India, who's a British citizen. He doesn't live in Iran. He's not an Iranian citizen. Why would a president of a country, of an Islamic country, issue a death warrant against a man who lives in England who's a British citizen? What's the jurisprudence? I'm not even a law student, but come on, this is logic. Why? You know why? Because Sharia told him to do so. He is perfectly within his right of Sharia. And that is the power of Sharia. That is the power of the death warrants that are being issued right and left in Arab and Muslim countries against Muslims who leave Islam or misbehave or say something against the religion of Islam. Recently, the government of Iran put a list of names of people in America who they call Islamophobes. The list has the names of some of the most distinguished and wonderful American citizens. And I'm one of them, unfortunately. It's a list, a hit list. And they're telling me, don't speak against Sharia. Why are you speaking against Sharia? Well, I have to. I'm supposed to be killed. I'm getting death warrants right and left in the Middle East. Is this legal? Is this holy? Is this good? Well, in their mind, this is legal. And this is the crux of the problem. You cannot run away from the death warrant when they are issuing it and encouraging citizens on the street. Now they are asking American Muslims, the Islamists, are telling them, go do terrorism just as an individual. And they're calling it, they're giving it a name of a lone wolf. Go do your terrorism. I'm not saying, of course, Muslims, majority of them, look at this and laugh. But there's always going to be one or two who will be influenced by such craziness. And that is our challenge. I'm not saying all Muslims will, of course not. Some of the nicest people I know in America are Muslim people, and I'm friends with them. I'm talking about the people who are issuing such fatwas on the internet. And if somebody who's a loner, who's crazy, you hear that, and they will do it. All this, and I haven't even started about the laws against women and non-Muslims. All men are not created equal under Sharia. As Muslims, we were told that Islam honored women, but wife beating is allowed under Sharia. There is no age limit in marriage of girls. There was very recently an 8-year-old Yemeni girl who was filing for divorce in Yemen, and another one filing for divorce in Saudi Arabia. The one in Yemen got her divorce. She was lucky. The one in Saudi Arabia was returned back to her 52-year-old husband. No age limit for girls to choose how she's married. They're born married, practically. Testimony of a woman in court is half the value of a man. So if a man and a woman go to court testifying against each other for some reason, guess who wins? The man. This is the law. A woman needs 4 male witnesses to prove rape. Guess how many rapes are reported in the Middle East? Practically 0. Nobody wants to report rape because she's going to be guilty. She doesn't have 4 male witnesses who testify against the guy who did it. So, and on and on and on. I mean, the women are a category by themselves under Sharia law. And non-Muslims. Non-Muslims, the Christians, I'll tell you a law in Islam. It says if a Muslim kills another Muslim in Islam, he will get the death penalty, which is fine. But if a Muslim kills a non-Muslim, he will not get the death penalty. This is the law, that they will not prosecute you, and you probably get away with murder if you're killing a non-Muslim. Guess how you feel if you're living in the Middle East and you're a jewelry store and you're a Christian, and somebody wants to rob your jewelry store and wants to kill you and rob your jewelry. You're at the mercy. You're at the mercy of the people. They can do it. They can kill you and say, I killed him because he insulted Islam. That's it. He gets away with it. Those who say that we have nothing to fear from Islamic law are either ill-informed or deceitful. How can I, who chose to leave Islam, which is legal under the international law and U.S. law, not be scared? How can I not be scared? When there is a law that says you have to be killed, there are fatwas of death against me in the Middle East, and there could be a cook walking, and he will do it and be a hero in the eyes of Allah. I am on a couple of I told you, of death threats. There are so many executions of people who left Islam. There is one man right now in Iran who left Islam. Look at what's going on. He became a Christian. And he is under the death penalty. He's already arrested and about to be executed. And the trick here, so the governments, the Muslim governments, don't violate international law. So what they do is they say, well, he's a spy because he's a Zionist. And he's working against our national interests. So they accused apostates, people who left Islam, with additional things, so that they execute them. Execute them for other reasons. And they documented that the reason is he's a spy, or he is helping the Zionist enemy. It becomes a political killing rather than a religious killing. And this is the trick how they get away with it. And now I will conclude because I think I want to get your questions. So the issue of Sharia is a human rights issue that crosses party line. This is not a democratic issue. This is not a Republican issue. This is a human issue. We have to stand up against tyranny. The number one victim of Jihad and Sharia are Muslims themselves. Those young men who go and give their lives for Allah's sake. But the West does not want to touch this topic of Sharia because they think Sharia is a religious rights of Muslims. But Sharia is not a religious right. How can the killing of an apostate and those who have permitted sex to be premarital sex, how can you say this is a religious right for them to kill me? This is not Sharia is not a religious right. To go and kill Jews is not a religious right. To kill apostates is not a religious right. Sharia is not a religious right. Talk about it as a law that is tyrannical and is barbaric and must be eliminated, not just from America. It must be eliminated from those poor Islamic countries who are fighting for their freedom and dying in the streets of Cairo for some kind of respect as a citizen. We must speak out. We owe it to the persecuted people in the Middle East, to the persecuted women and men, to the victims of terror and jihad. It's not up to me to be silent about persecution. It's up to the good and peace-loving Muslims who must start speaking out. There's an organization called CARE who's trying to silence me. I have never seen them walk and march against the killing apostates in the Middle East. Where is their condemnation of the Iranian government of wanting to kill a man right now? Where is the condemnation of the government of Afghanistan when there is a woman today sitting in jail awaiting execution? She's a Christian woman who's accused of blasphemy. I don't know, whoever reported her that she spoke ill of the Prophet Muhammad. That's a crime against Sharia, to speak against Islam or against Muhammad. You must be killed. Where is CARE here? CARE stands up and says, we're a religion of peace. Well, there are some governments and some people in the Middle East who are killing people in the name of Islam. Why are you silent? And all you want to do is silence me. Those are the people who are giving Islam a bad name, not me. And I will conclude by saying that human rights are more sacred and more divine than any scriptures. It doesn't matter what the religion is. It's not negotiable. It's not even negotiable to sacrifice human rights for the sake of religion. Any religion on earth, I don't care if it's Islam, Judaism, or Christianity, or whatever. Human rights are number one. It's not human rights that are to pass the litmus test of religion. It's religion that must pass the litmus test of human rights. Tolerating intolerance, ladies and gentlemen, is not compassion. You're not doing Islam or Muslims a favor when you are tolerating intolerance. It's gross negligence. Thank you very much. And I'll take questions. I'd like to take your questions now.
The Federalist Society and the Jewish Law Students Association asked me to step in an unbiased fashion, pick people at random. I told them I would do that, but I lied a little bit because I am going to be biased in that I'm going to try to keep those questions to our law students who are the primary audience here. So in that regard, I will be biased. So with that, yes, sir, start us off.
Okay. I don't know where to start, but I'll try. This whole lecture, if I can call it a lecture, is about law. And you're going through code sections, even though everybody who knows what Sharia law is knows that it's not codified. But let's assume that it is. You said law is clear. You can't say this is a law that says one thing but actually means another. I think everybody in this audience, at least from the third row behind, who has studied law, would agree with me that that's laughable. Everything you said today is contradicted by hundreds of texts. You talked about killing non-Muslims, that it's a religious duty. The Prophet said, whoever touches a non-Muslim, meaning harms him, has fought me, is against me. That's what I was taught as a Muslim. I don't know what you were taught, but let's be clear about one thing. All of the leaders that you've mentioned, all the Muslim countries that you've mentioned, which is the basis of all your all your problems with Sharia law, which I'm not disputing and I'm not saying that they don't happen. They absolutely happen. But anybody who's actually studied anything, anybody who's actually gone to school and studied these things will tell you these are secular governments. Everybody knows that about Gamal Abdel Nasser. Everybody knows that about Saddam. Everybody knows that about every single leader that you have mentioned. And to lump this all together and to say this is Islam, this is Islamic law, and it must, in your own words, be annihilated, is no different than me saying, well, there are Jewish settlers who burnt a mosque yesterday, therefore Jews are anti-Muslim or Jews are
They are saying it must be, Jews might be annihilated all the time in Cairo.
Okay, time out.
Yeah.
This is why I was elected to handle this. This is what we call the first bite in a dog case. You got the first bite, there will not be a second bite. This section is to ask questions. And I know you guys feel passionate about this issue, and everybody does, and everybody has a right to be passionate, but we need a question because speech times are over. So I will give you that question right now, but you can address his thought.
His thought, because
go ahead. That's the first and last fight.
It's very common that a lot of Muslims will give you a quotation, and I respect your opinion. I know you're a very fine Muslim man, and I understand what you're talking about, and I really sympathize with it. You gave me a quote from the Quran that is in the Medina time of Muhammad that has been already abrogated by the other half of the Quran, which calls for killing the Jews who are apes and pigs and enemies of Allah. When Muhammad himself was in Medina, he actually beheaded 800 Jewish men in the tribe and enslaved the women. So to say that killing is not allowed in Islam, I don't know where are you reading your Sharia books?
I am actually. I'm writing a law review comment on it, so I actually know more about it.
Okay, there is a lot of discrepancies in Islam, and I'm not going to resolve it for Islam because I don't think it's my job. It's a job of wonderful, brilliant Muslims like you who has to work to reconcile all these discrepancies and contradictions in your religion, and there is a lot of them. So,
by the way, who said we only study the dormant commerce clause in law and economics here? We're getting out on a limb here. How about right here?
My name is Gamal. I'm in law. I wanted to ask about the law that you said was the main big, the big shoe of it all. You said that it created a lot of coups and unstable governments, and this all related back to Sharia. And that was, the main reason. But how do you differentiate that from other governments in third world and developing nations that have had very similar government patterns?
Banana republics.
They didn't have Sharia law, but instead they were backed by the Catholic Church, or no religion was involved, like in parts of Africa.
That's a very good question. She's mentioning the law that states that. This law, I want to just get it here exactly. It's coming to office. For a Muslim head of state to come to office, it's okay to come through seizure of power, which means through force. And she's saying, how come you're saying that this is only allowed in Muslim countries? I hope you put up with my throat. But there is a lot of third world countries that have the same problem. And I agree. As a matter of fact, Sharia codified into law a lot of jungle laws, in my opinion. It codified killing. If it's not from your religion, kill them. By nature, we're all born with certain urges. But the legal system comes to civilize us and puts limitations on us. And in that sense, Sharia law resembles a lot Dark Ages law. So that's the only explanation I can give you.
Yes, ma'am. Right there.
So I'm also Tuala here, and I'm a Muslim woman. You said way too much, and I don't have time to answer it. And like you said, there are questions here. But I have one question for you, because as law students, we value scholarship and education, and we like credible sources. So, as far as I could find in your biography, you studied anthropology and sociology at American University in Cairo, and before that, you were in Catholic school, and you published some books after 9/11. I'm wondering what background you have that gives you authority to speak on behalf of Muslim women who are supposedly oppressed under Islamic law and other Muslims who you don't represent.
I don't have to have a degree to have credibility. And I believe that if a religion is not clear enough to the average person, is not clear enough to explain justice to the average person, and anybody should have the right to criticize it. I don't have to have a degree from Al-Azhar University in Sharia to speak about Sharia. I did write a book about Sharia called Cruel and Unusual Punishment, not unusual, usual punishment. And I had to study Sharia for about a year and a half. I read several Sharia books. And if Islam and Sharia are so sophisticated that the average person can't understand it, then I'm sorry, that it's not my fault.
Kind.
I want to say thank you very much for coming. I appreciate the opportunity to hear what you had to say. Let me ask you, you mentioned the circumstances surrounding your father's death at the hands of the Israelis because of the job he was doing for Nasser. Do you believe today that such counter-killings of people who engage in that kind of terrorist activity, the kind that your father was engaged in, do you believe that killing people such like that by Western countries is right?
Well, if a person, it's human nature. First of all, you don't have to have a law. If a person comes at you to kill you, you have to. you have to defend yourself and kill, and the same right of the individual goes to nations. So a nation who gets attacked daily with a barrage of rockets coming from Gaza, like Israel, I think Israel should target the sources of the absolutely. Actually, Israel is not doing good enough to protect itself, and it actually starts. It does its best. What I notice to really try to kill the source exactly of where it comes from, the shooting. And I congratulate. I mean, I really appreciate that about Israel, because there is a lot of wonderful Arabs, and I hate to see civilians getting killed. And I see that Israel is doing its best not to kill. If they wanted to kill my father, the traditional way by throwing rockets and killing half the people in Gaza, at that time it was a little town, Gaza. They could have done that, and that's the traditional way of doing war. But what they did was really send him targeted bomb for him alone. And I remember I was in the movie at that time. I was only 7 or 8, and I heard the bomb, and I didn't know where it was. But it was ordinary to hit bombs in Gaza, and then I knew it was my dad, and it was a big tragedy, because he was a very, very decent man. A lot of these people who are doing actions against Israel really are really well intentioned, but they are listening to what you've just seen here, day in, day out, and they really read their Quran and they say Jews must be killed, and it's not about the land. As you've seen, the last man, on Arab TV they say, well, no, we're going to kill the Jews in Israel not because it's an Arab-Israeli conflict. It's not over land. It's our ideology that says we should kill them. And a lot of people, unfortunately, fall into this. And that's why it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy.
Yes, sir, with the headphones, right?
You were describing a lot of the tenets in Sharia law, such as killing women, killing those. They sound very similar to me to certain Christian doctrines that say you must stone someone who doesn't follow our faith, or the belief that we have to go to war with people who don't believe us. So I'm wondering, is there a difference between these Christian doctrines that say that and Sharia law, or are they similar in your eyes? Or
I'll tell you what, frankly, I'm not very familiar with any laws in Sharia, in Christianity that condemn people to death.
The fundamentalist Christians would say it is our God-given duty to find those who do not believe in Christianity and kill them the same way Sharia law.
Then they are just as, if any Christian reads their books and fly planes into buildings to kill people, I'd be the first one to say they are bad. But find me a law in Christianity that says that. It has nothing, it's not Islam or Christians or any. There used to be religions in the world that did human sacrifice. I mean, in the old days, they used to go to get the rain. They want rain, so they just get a virgin and throw her in the river. So God will send us rain. Let's do human sacrifice. So humanity has a lot.
But there have been nations in the past that have taken laws. I'm sorry. I apologize.
All right. It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir. Right there.
I can actually provide some. It's actually not from Christianity. Some of them are from the Old Testament, and some are from the ancient Israeli Supreme Court. But one says, and kind of similar to what you said, when a Muslim killing a Muslim shall receive the death penalty, but a Muslim killing a non-Muslim shall receive nothing. There is an old rule from an ancient Israeli court that says when a Jew murders a Gentile, there shall be no death penalty. And what a Jew steals from a Gentile, he may keep. All Gentile children are animals, even the best of Gentile. And this is actually just a statement from a rabbi, so it's not law. But even the best of Gentiles should all be killed. These are so. Would you
comment on that?
Well, one, would you apply your vigorous treatment of Muslim to the Jewish faith now, or do you see a difference between the two?
I'll tell you what. I don't care what religion it is. I want to see the religion, what is Is this law effective in Israel today? Is it the law in Israel today? If this is a law in Israel today and people are following it actually today, then I'll condemn it. If Israel or the Jewish people are not following it, then it's null and void. The problem is Muslims are following it today. It's effective today. It's in the Egyptian constitution, article number 4 today. And that's why the Christians today in Egypt are being killed. And nobody's getting arrested. There's an attack on the church when the kids were leaving at Christmas Eve in Egypt, just last Christmas. The church, a lot of young men and teenagers, they were all wearing their new suits and pretty dresses leaving church. And there was a drive shooting, killing about 12 teenagers as they were leaving the church, Christmas party or something. And until today, there's nobody in jail for these crimes in Egypt. When I see this, that's when I say it's still being taught today. I don't know. I have not lived in Israel to come and tell you that does the Israeli law follow this, and they tell the Israeli kids today, go kill Arab children, you're not going to get any, you will not go to jail. If that's happening in Israel, then I'll be the first one to condemn it. If it's in the Christian churches today, they're telling them to go kill non-Christians, then of course it's wrong. I don't care what religion.
Yes, sir.
Most of your speech today focused on the dangers of Sharia and not as much on the other tenets of Islam. Do you feel the two are severable?
That's a good question. It's not what I feel if they're not separable. Muslims feel that they're not separable. To be a Muslim is to believe not only in the Quran, in the Hadith, and follow Sharia. So Muslims who criticize Sharia and live in the Muslim world are considered apostates and they get killed. So to claim that Sharia is not a religious right and that is you cannot apply to me because I'm not a Muslim, let's say I'm a Christian who lives in Egypt. Can you believe it? Christians who live in the Muslim world are obliged to live under Sharia law. They have to. There was, after the revolution in Egypt, there was a governor who was elected, who was a Christian, who was elected in an area in Upper Egypt that's predominantly Christian. And he was elected. Riots and burning of buildings started happening, saying an apostate will not rule. It's against Sharia that a Christian rules in a Muslim country. It's happening today. So whether you think Sharia, it's not my opinion that's important. It's not your opinion that's important. What's important is what 1.2 billion Muslims who live in Muslim countries, who have Christian minorities, how they apply the law of Sharia. And to them, to follow Sharia as part of the religion is actually, in my opinion, to be a true Muslim, according to Islam, not according to me, is to follow Sharia.
We've got about 5 more minutes because we actually have to cede this room back. After those questions end, I will ask you all to stay seated so that our guests can leave. But let's get in some more questions if we can. Yes, sir, right here.
Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you very much, Mrs. Darwish. My question is regarding those fundamental rights that you see that you use as a calculus to determine whether or not a given religion should be abolished in some part or not. Where do you see the foundation for those rights? Aren't those usually rights that stem from your religion? And so how do you get out of that kind of...
It's a vicious circle. That's the problem. And the problem is built in the Sharia. The Sharia itself has a law at the end of the book that says, it's part of an area of the book that states what are the major sins where you can be prosecuted. It's called Kabair, huge sins. It says, it's built in it is, if you criticize any aspect of Sharia, you become an apostate. So here we are. If you're a Muslim and you don't like an aspect, if you criticize it, you become an apostate, whether you like it or not. So where are you going to get out of this? It's up to Muslims to solve this problem. It's up to the good and peace-loving Muslims to really examine all of the consequences of Sharia on life, in real life, because it's almost a vicious circle. It's never ending.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I lived in Egypt for the past year, and I was teaching at Suez Canal University in Egypt as an English teacher. And I was there for part of the revolution before I was evacuated. My question for you is, where are you getting the prevalence that a lot of the revolution is based in Sharia? Because from talking with my students, both Christian and Muslim, and after the bombing of the mosque in Alexandria that you're talking about, there was a prevalence of seeing the crescent across together, saying, we stand together as one and we condemn this attack. I'm just wanting to know where you're getting the Salafi interpretation is kind of the whole push behind the overthrow of Mubarak, because talking to my students and the dialogue that me and my co-teacher had with about 600 students and people in the community was that we are doing this in response to unemployment and the lack of jobs and the corruption within Mubarak's regime, not necessarily for any religious reason, but for more substantial things of we're dying to live.
Absolutely.
And the fact that the revolution started in Tunisia with the self-immolation of a man over the price of bread, not necessarily for any religious reason at all.
That's a very good question, because you're saying that most people in Egypt who are for the revolution really are not thinking about Sharia. They don't connect the dots. But that is why I'm speaking out, because I'm connecting the dots. If you look at the history of the whole Middle East, it's one revolution after another. Revolution, tyranny, revolution, tyranny, revolution. And it's never ending. And the reason is because true freedom is never accomplished after every revolution. Why? They have to stop for once and say, why? Why do we get rid of one dictator and we're suddenly getting another dictator? Worse. Why? And the reason is because Sharia, by its nature, if you keep applying it, it will never result in democracy or freedom. And when you don't have democracy, when you don't have freedom, and if all your energy as a country is towards killing the apostates, killing the Jews, right after the revolution, there was a huge demonstration in Tahrir Square. About what? Not about let's raise the economy, let's go fix our country. It was about destroying Israel. Their energy is not going for empowering themselves economically. Their energy now is going, they went and attacked Eilat. They are now finding another excuse to attack Israel. Eilat belongs to Egypt. They are looking for a problem with Israel. This kind of mindset is not going to improve their economy. When Gamal Abdel Nasser did his revolution in 1952, it was the same thing. The people were happy. We're finally going to have a better economy. And all his energy was about destroying Israel, is about jihad, and that brought Egypt to its knees economically. I believe that as long as there is Islamism and there is Sharia law, we will never have a prosperous Egypt.
All right, folks. That bumps us right up against our time. I appreciate you coming out to the event. Federalist Society, Jewish Law Student Association, thank you for hosting this type of event. Free speech is broken out all over George Mason this week. That I think is good and healthy. And so if you folks would be patient enough to let our speaker exit, have a great night and thanks for coming out.
Thank you very much.